Welcome to Kettlebell Corner, where strength meets theory, where we join you for a deeper dive into all things kettlebell. I'm Jeremiah Waylon, and that's Roger Parks. And today we're going to get into drills for your skills. What does that mean? We all have these aspirations of being great at kettlebells, Roger, and to get there, we probably got to practice some things along the way, some check marks that allow us to put the skill together. So I kind of want to know, how do we come up with new drills or use existing drills or movements to get better at our kettlebell skills? You mentioned a couple of pieces in our prep about capacity and learning the individual pieces. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes.
Okay, do it.
Okay.
Now. Right now.
So there is this can be a two-part problem, and it doesn't mean that you need to go in two distinct stages. Both of these lanes, so to speak, should happen at the same time, concurrently. When you're looking at building up a skill, there is both a learning piece, which is where the drills will come in. And I guess we should probably talk about what's the difference between a drill and a movement. I don't know, but we should probably talk about that. But in addition to the learning piece, there's a capacity piece, meaning, is your body currently prepared for the thing that you are trying to get it to do? There have been a few cases that I'm aware of, and even one that I was involved with, where I worked with somebody online who was very surprised at just a couple tweaks would do to his form. He figured it all out. I told him, all right, practice, take it slow. Didn't hit that hard enough because he went nuts, and, I checked in a week later. It's like, hey, I think I'm doing something wrong. And, I looked at his video. It's like, no, you're not doing anything wrong. He just went to doing right from going to, no swings. It's like, oh, well, everyone does 100 swings in a workout. Like, well, no, that's not true, first of all. But second of all, you aren't ready for 100 swings. So he, even though his form was fine, he ended up hurting himself because he didn't respect his body's current ability. So capacity is about getting your body ready, your muscles, your bones, your soft tissues, your connective tissue especially, because that can take several months even to develop and get strong enough. So one of the things that I think you should consider is, as you are learning your skills to improve or learning drills to improve your skills, or as you're learning a new skill, make sure that you're doing plenty of work that allows things to kind of unfold slowly, build your physical capacity in the background, and then give your soft tissue, specifically your connective tissues, time to adapt. So what that might look like is, as you're doing drills to learn a snatch, you are still doing your squats, maybe some deadlifts, you're doing some get-ups, some push-ups, you're still working out. Some overhead presses would be solid. And if assuming you've already earned the right to swing, you're also doing some swings and getting that volume going. In this scenario, if we were to keep going through, follow this through logically, then your swings are going to be good at preparing your lower body, but you're still going to have this upper body piece, because snatches can get kind of intensive with the elbows and the wrists if you're not used to doing them. So maybe you've also earned the right to clean. Okay, now maybe we start throwing some double bell cleans in there. So these are things that you can do to both build the capacity that gets you ready for the skill, prepares your legs, prepares your elbows and wrists, but is also going to help cue in some of the things that you need to feel. So really important that you don't lose sight of the capacity piece, because you can learn a drill or learn a new skill immediately. I've seen coaches do it. My understanding is, I think back in the old days of the RKC, they used to pull people in off the street. And they used
fancy.
to say, like, hey, teach this person how to swing. And if you could get them reasonably close, then, you pass. That was part of the coaching test. Again, I could be wrong. Yeah. I'm not making this up. I heard it, but
maybe you've been wrong once before. Yeah.
So let's say though that was true, and you had a great teacher and a great student, and someone learned how to swing. They'd never done it before, and like, hey, let's go. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
They go home, they've got this new skill, and then I'm going to swing 1,000 times a day. And then, you break yourself. So really
Yes, you have
important
to have
to
a little
not.
patience, little patience in this process, right?
You have to, and something I think we did a video on this, so you can probably link that or reference it or
Yeah.
something. But we work with something called 151, and once we learn a skill, we go through, we use the 151 method to reinforce these skills and get better at it. This is not advanced programming. This is really just skill acquisition.
But I will say,
yeah.
I will. Yeah, are you going to explain it real quick? Because I think you can explain it without going in depth for people to understand it, right?
Yeah, the one is
Yeah.
just a single rep. Get your single rep until your technique is right. Then once you starting, you've gotten good at the single rep, go to 5. That's your ladder training. You're starting to add on some volume that way. And then the second one is 1 minute. So using time as a way to either modulate rest or cram in more volume in a shorter amount of time. So this is a way to learn skills, and you can get stronger this way. But this is the method we use before we go into advanced programming.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand. And if you're a coach, you can set this expectation. I do this all the time with my people. I got a guy right now learning the snatch, and we did one for a week. And he came back after a week, and he's like, "Oh, I think I got this." And I said, "Well, show me." And he did. And I said, "Great." And we did a ladder in our session. I said, "This is what we're going to do until you prove otherwise, until you get to like 5 ladders, and then we'll be good. And then we'll move to the next one." I explained it to him what it is. And a lot of times, to Roger's point is you need to have this mindset of, I'm not trying to do this 100 swings because if I don't, I'm a puss. I'm trying to do this so I don't get hurt, so I can train for life, as we like to put it, like as in forever, and so I can be better at my daily life, right? So this 151 method is definitely tried and true, and it will get your tissues headed in the right direction.
So we want to think about capacity concurrently with skill acquisition. Do keep in mind, though, that skill acquisition is neurologically draining. It's difficult. So your skill acquisition should probably come first in your session. So do them together. It's not like do this, then do that. Do X amount of squats for so many months, and then you can begin to learn this. Like that, no one's going to follow that, and you don't.
That's
need
a
to do
weird
that anyway.
like hierarchy sort of thing.
Sure,
It's bizarre.
that's not a thing.
Yeah, and one real quick thing is that neurological thing. I suppose we'll do another episode on that, but that's super important. That is draining. Your brain uses a lot of calories. Speaking of using a lot of calories in our brain, what do we do to build a skill? Where do we start, Roger? Where do you like to start?
So I like to start with the physics of the thing, because physics don't change. People do. Context changes, injury history, all of these things, your current ability, that's different with everybody. Body types. The physics, though, don't. At least right now, while we're on Earth, and Earth is behaving the way it's behaving. So we can look at the physics and say, okay, what is it that we're trying to learn? So give me a skill.
Let's go with the snatch, because I feel like that's one we'll probably tap back into. Or is that too?
No,
or should we go swing?
Either way, you're gonna build these things in a similar way. If you're building a swing, then you need to build a new context there. Whereas if you're building a snatch, you should already, in most cases, you will already have the context of the swing, because swings are generally less complex. So people usually start there. So we're dealing. So it's we've got to choose our own adventure here. So do you want to swing or do you want to snatch? You need to be decisive. People are watching.
Oh shit, I'm on. Let's go swing, because
Okay.
yes, that will be the prerequisite, and then we'll get to that other stuff.
A swing is a ground reaction force. People like to categorize it as a hinge because they're looking at the shape of the thing. And this is a prime example of what goes wrong. And I know people are tired of getting of hearing me say this stuff, but I don't care. This transfers over into pretty much all of your other skills. So when I'm talking about swings and hinges, I'm really talking about training philosophy, and I'm talking about physics. Once you understand the physics of a few basic movements, you understand the physics of all kettlebell movements, which is why I think it's worth learning. The swing, being a ground reaction force, relies on contact force, and it relies on vertical contact force. So you need to get good at pushing your feet into the ground. this is going to be the starting point for everything we do. If we look at a deadlift, a hinge, and we say, well, this is going to be the cornerstone of our swing training, it's neglecting a lot of things. But first and foremost, it neglects the direction of the force and how you generate it. So while I think the deadlift is really important to teach the backswing and to prime the bell path, there are some key differences between deadlifts and swings that we can't ignore. Like we heard the other day on a podcast that what was the line that a swing is a dynamic deadlift or something, or a fast deadlift.
Something. And that's spewed out all over the place.
Sure.
You probably heard it right before you checked out this episode.
So it just isn't true. The bell starts in a different place. The speed is different. The soft tissue behavior is different. So we do rely, and there are now studies that demonstrate this, but you are relying on pushing your feet straight into the floor for a swing. So we need to, when we're going through and learning that, we need to teach people that sensation. So squats, in my opinion, are better to teach vertical force production than hinges because you use more quad and you have more of you that's pushing straight down. Now, I'm not saying end there, but when we teach, you need to do something else, and we'll get to this, but you need to teach the proper feeling of the thing. So if we're going based on the physics and we're looking at vertical force production, we're looking at things like we're looking at squats, we're looking at goblet cleans, which is a little more vertical in the bell path. We're looking at jumps. These are the things we're looking at, and don't get me wrong, deadlifts are important, and you can definitely see the shape of a hinge in a swing, and you need to learn that shape. Deadlifts are great for teaching that shape, and there's another drill that I use called point to your heels that teaches you kind of a 45-degree torso angle, teaches you how to get your weight back. But that's setting the path and the destination of the swing. That's like pulling back the bowstring, right? The force that makes the bowstring go is the vertical force where the string actually attaches its tension, but where it attaches to the two uprights of the bow. It's not horizontal force. That's going to be a horizontal path, but it's a product of vertical force, just like your swing is going to be vertical force making the hips come forward. So we need to understand the physics of the thing first. And then we can start to say, well, actually a jump is a better thing to teach the sensation of swinging. And during a swing, the things that are often left out are the sensations, right? You get all the shapes and you talk about the power breath and all that stuff. But what people often miss is how do you actually get people to feel making the bell ballistic or making your body ballistic before you get to swinging. And that's where goblet cleans and jumps come in.
Yeah, that's where you sort of add that speed element. You with the physics, it's great. You don't have to get caught up in body shapes or anatomy. This, like you said, it's on Earth. We have to obey these rules. We didn't choose them; they chose us. Now, when you add that speed, you had mentioned before that this will teach us the right way to feel. Can you elaborate on what do you mean by the right way to feel? Because I feel good now, but when I add speed, how am I going to feel?
Well, that's important. I'm glad you feel good, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Check with me on Monday. I won't feel good, I'm sure.
Oh, it's the marathon this weekend.
Yeah, tomorrow, buddy.
Your body can use theory to begin to move. And as you move, your brain learns movement. But it's through movement that you learn movement. And I know that might sound silly. I love theory. I love thinking about it. I love talking about it. But you can't just go out and read a book and then walk up having never experienced any of these things and swing a kettlebell. It doesn't work that way. You need to slowly go through and feel all of these sensations. So as you deconstruct a skill, what do you need for a swing? You need to be able to make the bell ballistic. That's what we were just talking about, the physics of the thing. Okay, so you need to make the bell accelerate up faster than gravity can pull it down. And in order to do that, you're going to need to get in contact with some muscles, some quads and some glutes and some hamstrings. You're going to need to feel some tension in your midsection so the whole thing doesn't fall apart. You're going to need to feel the position of the backswing. So you're going to need to think, this is where the creativity and the curiosity comes in. What lessons do I need to learn as a coach? What lessons do I need to learn? So they're going to need to learn power breathing. Well, they also might need to learn a regular breath first. There are a lot of things that they're going to need to learn, and the most of drill making comes down to, what can I figure out to do that teaches somebody else to feel what I want them to feel? And the appropriate feeling, it needs to be directional. So we're talking about force. And it is definitely speed dependent. You need to consider soft tissue behavior. So if you're looking at, let's go back to the differences between a swing and a deadlift, where a deadlift is loaded is different than where a swing is loaded. A deadlift starts from beneath your feet. A swing does not. So as that bell either moves from during a swing, as it moves from into either a hike or a backswing, you have a bell that moves farther back. So now you need to be able to maintain a different backswing position. That also means that you're going to rely on some stretch from your hamstrings. So hamstrings need to be able to stretch. How do you get people to feel that? One of the things I do is when I'm teaching them the hike, I'm also teaching them how to, also getting some capacity and conditioning, but I'm teaching them how to feel that stretch in the hamstring, which is why I tend to teach my swings with a shift before, rather than starting all the way back in the hike position. I teach a little shift first, because it teaches the feeling of loading the hamstrings, and that stretch is something you can bring into your next swing. So the feeling is, if you can tell someone, hey, get tight, or you can put them in a position where if they don't get tight, they'll fall or they'll bend in half or whatever. So you want to teach by feel rather than just saying things. And I remember learning as a new trainer that just saying the same thing, sometimes even in an escalating tone 100 times, does not teach someone what to do.
What are you talking about? Tension, squeeze your butt, squeeze your butt.
Whatever it happens to be. One of my first clients was great. He looked at me. I'd been training this guy for, I don't know, close to a year at this point, and I kept saying, squeeze your glutes. And he looked at me, he's like, do you mean the cheeks or the hole? And I hadn't really thought about it. I meant the cheeks, I suppose, but you could probably get some benefit from squeezing the hole too. But either way, this guy has been working with me for a year and didn't know what I was talking about. And never asked me, never questioned. I'm saying the same thing. Yeah, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, because if I clearly was saying it because I didn't like what I was seeing. So this is an example of me not teaching by feel. This is an example of me teaching by theory.
I know. My next question is, did you squeeze his cheeks or his hole?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. That got sideways. So the feel has a few different aspects. That speed and the feel of a good drill. You said it should make you feel something. And you had mentioned a pretty good example that this is something that we went through on our own, and then subsequently when we went to our next certification with Strong First, they had, I guess, evolved their thinking of it, and that's the old classic high pull to teach the snatch to the elevator drill to teach the snatch, more so the bell path and whatnot. And there's a significant feeling difference between the two of those. One is you feel this bell from way out in front of you and you're pulling it back, and one you feel it kind of rise up off your body, and that is a good feeling. It's like really good, and you can feel that. That's part of it. And is there anything you can add to any of that as feel, or you feel good about feelings?
Well, I do think this is a good example, and what we're really looking at is just behavior. Yeah. If you are doing an isometric, let's say you're doing an isometric row versus, concentric, eccentric, doing regular repetitions, it's a completely different feeling. If you've worked out, you know that feeling is different. So the high pull is one, when you're using the high pull, you're teaching an improper bell path, because the snatch now, as it's evolved, it should remain close to the body. Whereas a high pull begins far away from the body and then pulls back. So one, you're teaching a poor bell path. So that's one feeling that isn't really properly matched. The second thing you're teaching is a different muscle behavior. So you're with the elevator drill, you're teaching that lat, those back muscles, to be isometric, to keep the bell in line with you and to pull it along with you rather than getting out ahead of you. So I think that's a great example of how this violates, the high pull violates the objective of the skill. This goes back to the physics. What are your objectives? If your objective is to have a more vertical force trajectory or bell path, and you're teaching someone to start with the bell path out in front of you, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So the evolution of the elevator makes a lot more sense because it is both compatible with the physics of the lift, the objective of the lift, as it relates to the bell path, and teaches you the proper feeling of the muscles and the soft tissue.
Yeah, that makes sense. Final thing, is some external constraints, right? Like, let's add a little bit of extra stuff to the mix. Everybody wants a new gadget. So what kind of gadgets, or let's call them constraints, can we use for teaching or developing these drills and to inform the skills?
Yeah,
what's worked for you?
You can go back and read on all this stuff, and they're two commonly referenced things in training: constraints and affordances. And loosely one makes you realize the essence of the thing, makes it easier for you to do something. The other one makes it harder to do something. Usually people talk about constraints, and that's what I'll talk about. And this is not technically correct when you go back to the learning theory where this comes from. This is just kind of how fitness has adapted it. If you give someone an objective to meet, so we talked about in an episode recently about squatting facing the wall. Okay, and how I think it's a bad idea. That wall would act as a constraint. It doesn't let you move. So if you start to squat and your torso starts to pitch forward, probably because that's your shape and that's how you need to squat, but let's leave that alone. If you continue to do that, you're either going to slam your face into the wall or you're going to drag your face down the wall, neither of which I recommend. So you're putting something that is directly in front of you in order to restrict your motion, and then it becomes a movement puzzle that you need to solve. So that's how constraints will work. You may have heard about using like a bed sheet to drape in front of you to restrict the path, the arc of the snatch. That would be another way. But in addition to that, we can kind of take off from there and start using more visual cues. Things that you might look at. One really common one we use is when we're teaching someone ballistics, we'll put a water bottle on the floor, and then we'll say, look at this mark on the wall. So their eyes, we know that their movement behavior is going to largely track with their eye behavior. So we decide where we want the eyes to go. Look here, now look there. That happens to be the focus of this particular set. Water bottle, wall, water bottle, wall, water bottle, wall. It's all you're thinking about. So you can also use some visual cues in order to do that. But when you take all of those things together, the physics, when you take the feel, and you account for things like soft tissue behavior. Does this lift behave like that lift? And if it doesn't, if the deadlift does not behave like the swing, then we need to use a jump or something else that mimics the soft tissue behavior of that thing. And then when we get into the next phase, once we get the right feel and we look at these visual or tactile cues, we look at constraints. Now we can start putting these things together and using these techniques. One of my favorite things to do is just give someone an objective that if they complete it, they have done what I want them to do. All they have to do is solve this movement puzzle. And if they do that, they do exactly what I want. So there's no theory, there's no explanation. You don't need to listen to a podcast on it. You just
wait a second. Listen to this podcast on it. Do you have like a recent example of something like that? I love that idea of like, hey, if you can solve this, you've done it, right?
Well, one thing that I'll use So I did this in a squat rack, and this was to help a clean. So those orange mobility sticks,
Yeah.
okay, those are really cool. I like those. Now, the clean has a path similar to the snatch, so you want to keep it close, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you also need to have that roll, and you need to emphasize the fact that the clean is going to start probably more toward the middle, but it's going to end up toward one side. So if you're looking at the actual path of the clean, it's going to be more of a diagonal. So it'll start toward the middle. So if you're doing a right clean, it'll start more towards your right side probably, if you line the bell up there. But then it will move out toward the outside of your right forearm. So I set up a mobility stick in a squat rack where if someone and I had it so the bell needed to move on a diagonal. If the bell moved straight up, even though everything else was technically correct and effective, it would have hit the mobility stick. Now, this isn't going to cause anyone injury or pain, so that's obviously a consideration. I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm going to put a samurai sword here. If you get it wrong, you're going to lose your
You
wrist.
lost your fingers.
That's probably dumb. So, the stick is there. It's not anchored. It's just sat right on the squat rack, so it's really easy to knock off. Okay,
Right.
No pain, no potential for injury. So as the bell would swing up, it was the end of the mobility stick was toward the center of my body, meaning as the bell came up, it needed to move away from center. So I had that physical constraint there, and then I had instant feedback as well. It's like, well,
Perfect.
I'm doing it wrong. Okay, well, stop doing it wrong. Don't hit the stick. Well, what should I do?
figure it
I
out.
told you, don't hit the stick. And it took a couple times, and guess what? He didn't hit the stick, and the clean improved.
Yeah. And you just kind of let somebody discover for themselves, because everybody's the same. You can't just yell at them, clean, 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 clean. You're like, hey, let's try this way, and you figure it out. I'll be
Sure.
here to support your decisions. Sort of like parenting.
We need success and failure too when we're learning these things. If you obviously want people to have a feeling of success, because when you build on that feeling of success, then you can continue with the next step, either reinforcing something or adding on to it. So you need the success; it's critical. But the feeling of failure is one where your brain starts to notice, like, oh wait, that didn't work. Let me do something different. Which is one of the things, students who have worked with me for a period of time know that I'm not really big on the on the pouting and head shaking. Excuse me. So if you do something, let's say it happens most often with the snatch. If you're doing a snatch that's mostly right, but you don't quite get it right, and you walk off and you pout, and you shake your head, and you're just a big crybaby, like, go home. I don't have time
Yeah.
for this. You did most of this right, and you're invalidating all of it. Step back and say, wait a second. I failed at this part. All of this is good. What can I do to fix this? Get over yourself.
Yeah, I second that. And I may or may not be one of these people that have learned from him for a while. But that's just a lesson for life too, Sometimes
Sure.
you can't just take the one thing and dwell on it. There's a lot of good that comes from that. I like that. This is pretty solid. So we got, when you're building your drills for your skills, you got to consider your capacity, let your tissues develop, follow a little plan. The 151 is pretty good. And always start with the physics, because you don't have to take people's body shape or anatomy into account. It's the law. Sylvester Stallone said it. Then you layer on the speed, and then you got to feel something. Really feel it. What are you feeling? Help people feel this. And I like that example of the mobility stick in the squat rack, because you got to solve that problem, and you're going to feel when you do it wrong, because you'll bump that and it'll give you a little bit of a jolt, and you're like, oh, hey, wait, I did it wrong. And I love that. That's a little element of creativity. We didn't really elaborate on that too much, but you can be creative in these senses, and do these sort of things when you're creating the drills for the skills. And one final thing I want to add to that is, some of these movements, like we talked about early on in the episode, these exercises actually could be drills for said skill. That squat drills that isometric row helps you get your back ready for even swings, but more so cleans and snatches and these sort of things. So you don't always have to have like, oh, you got to put yourself in this weird funky way. And it could be something as simple as, like we said, the water bottle in the wall. That's a great drill, and that really does do numbers. So if you're trying to get somebody to swing and you haven't tried that drill yet, I recommend you try it. Anything else you want to add?
No.
All right, that's it.
That's it. I think we did a decent job.
All right. Well, adequate enough. And, send us your favorite drills. If you have any questions, please hit us up. You can hit us up in the comments below. Feedback, questions, discussions, we welcome it all, and we appreciate you. And be sure to download the Bells app from the Apple App Store, and stay strong.